All right. Cool. Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming down on this chilly Wednesday morning, day 3 of this extremely socially stimulating event, which is great. I'm sure we're looking forward to recharge and then get straight into PAX, which is going to be fun. So before we begin, I'd like to acknowledge the Wurrung people of the Kulin Nation and pay my respects to the elders past, present, and emerging. My name is Dylan Bennett, and I'm going to take you on a bit of a tour of the Northern Territory and where we started a couple of years ago and where we are now. So if that's not the talk you think you're in, now's the time to run. So let's see how I drive this. So the start of how this talk came together was from 2 separate reports, the one that IGEA publishes in collaboration with one university, the state of the industry in Australia. So in the 2020 report on the left, Northern Territory is circled just in case there are some in here who aren't quite sure where it is. That's okay, we're going to tell you a little bit about it soon. You can see under the circled bit, there's nothing there. And the most recent one, we've got a 3% now representation of the workforce. And that kind of growth happened in a very short amount of time. So we're going to explain how exactly that did. But just to give people a little bit of context, oh man, formatting, love it. So a couple of facts so that we can paint the context of the Northern Territory and what kind of environment we're working in every day. So the population is only 1% of Australia's population. We're tiny. You know, Australia is tiny and the Northern Territory is a tiny part of a tiny country. But what is really interesting and what makes the Northern Territory such a delight to work in is we are such a diverse place. So 30% of the people in Northern Territory identify as First Nations, and 20% are not born in Australia. They're born overseas. So 50% of our population. It's such an amazing, culturally diverse place to work in. And it makes it, like for us growing up in the Northern Territory, we've normalised that. But we realise when we travel around Australia that that's maybe not the way other places are. So that's something that's really special about the Northern Territory and why it's so important that we also contribute to this amazing industry that we're all here to learn more about and to be in. So Darwin holds the most people, 150,000 people-ish, and then the next one is Alice Springs with about 40,000. So we're a small population that's spread out over quite a large bit of area. In this talk, I'm really talking about community-driven economic development. And I taught entrepreneurship at RMIT University for some time, and while I was there, one of the key thought leaders for me in this particular space, Ernesto, and enterprise facilitation is his kind of methodology. It's from the 80s, so it has been around for a little while, but I really appreciate the lens that he puts on what it is to develop the economy inside a particular community, and that is, it is the community-driven. And what does that actually mean in this context? Well, in his words, it's never initiate, never motivate, always respond. And it's a really important thing that we often, even myself, when really passionate about helping people, forget. People are intrinsically motivated for self-development, and if we remember that, then it's about finding what people are passionate in and unlocking and removing barriers in their own passion. You know, so, or another way of kind of talking about is when you are arriving somewhere, or if you're really looking at developing a community, your first port of call is to find the people who are already passionate, who are in that community. That's got to be the number one priority before you kind of do anything else. Ernesto has the analogy where he would go to a coffee shop and he would sit down and wait. You know, and that's the kind of, that was great in the 80s, post-COVID, I don't know, it's a little trickier, but we kind of have to facilitate that in a different way. The second one is, like, once you've found the people who are passionate, listen instead of talk. So listen to what they're actually facing in terms of their challenges, and then it's about finding ways to unlock or unblock them. So just to give a little bit of context into the lens that I used when we're talking about developing an area or a community or an industry. Spoiler alert, we had heaps of help and we couldn't have done it without it. And I think that's super important to acknowledge. We had people many of you are so helpful. You're in the room right now, even though you were in the journey the whole way through. And we had people who were giving time, giving your feedback, giving your mentorship, and just saying thank you. Unfortunately, we have quite a quick talk. Otherwise, I'd love to go into the individual stories and the way you've helped. But just know that anyone who's ever not ghosted me and returned the call and given a bit of advice, you have contributed massively to what we're about to go through. So that's saying thank you. What is an industry? Okay, so really what we're talking about is a group of companies that operates in a similar business sphere, and its categorization is kind of somewhat narrow as defining it separately to a sector. Okay, what does that mean? A bunch of organizations who are a bunch of people who are kind of working in a similar kind of thing. That's the definition we're going with, but it can be really helpful to think in these three pillars. When you're raising up a community, you can divide an industry or a group or a community into what is public, organizations that aren't necessarily influenced by the free market or market forces, is a really loose definition of what we might think about. Private, so organizations that definitely are. And then your NGO volunteer space, which is kind of your passionate people who are kind of working on things, but not necessarily getting paid a lot for it. But that's not to say that not-for-profits are not for profit. Okay, so this is kind of the lens that we look at, the landscape, and this is what the landscape actually was when we first arrived. So if we break up the big players in Northern Territory in 2020, this is who was there. So in the public sector, or the public area, we've got the Northern Territory government, who's the largest employer in the Northern Territory by far. They're a really powerful force within the Northern Territory. We don't really have a private entity that can match the weight of the Northern Territory government, which is really important to realise the economy that you're kind of working in and who you need to be seeing and talking to. Innovation Territory is a subdivision of the Northern Territory government, so they had just started. They hadn't really figured out what they were doing, but they knew they needed to start doing innovation in a really big way. And the City of Palmerston is a local council, and they have a lot of amazing programs for youth and youth development, and they were kind of already funding some esports youth groups who I met with later on. In a private sector, we've got an esports organisation, local league, which is amazing because I thought I would have to kind of help and see if anyone wanted to create one, but it's already been running since 2015 somehow, which is really cool. The Level Up Gaming is the youth, for youth by youth, that run out of Palmerston. And Rusted Warfare, we're going to get in a little bit longer. That is the surprise hit game that we didn't realise had actually been made in the Northern Territory until we did a bit of digging. So, and then on the volunteer side, there was a committee of geeks who were advising on the local council about how to run a kind of geek event. And it was very unofficial at that time. So, now, this is how the Northern Territory looks in terms of the different organisations in the different ways. It's a very, very different, it's a much more robust ecosystem now than it was in 2020, which is great because when you fill out each of these pillars, they're like legs on a table. And if any one of these pillars aren't really represented, then the industry has a larger chance, I guess, of not being strong enough to kind of carry forward through the harder times or the leaner times. And all right, I'm done. Thank you. No, I'm kidding. Right, we're going to unpack how we actually got there. So just as a, this is the way I'm going to do it. I've got about 5 minutes to go through each year. So it's going to be super quick. And I just kind of want to say there's a lot of stories here that I'm not going to be able to talk about. A lot of moments in the evolution over the last few years that I'm not going to be able to touch on. And it's going to be a bit zippy, so hold on. We kind of look at it at different chapters. The first one is just a little bit about my background. And then chapter 1, does anyone even care about video games in the NT? Like, that's a really important question to ask when you're starting out, because if no one does, then okay, great, maybe it's not the right time or the place to be doing this. Do we have what it takes to make games? Okay, if there's people who care, can we actually do the thing? And then, okay, where do we go to from here, or where can we get to? All right, hold on. So, I kind of undernard about putting this slide in, but I just wanted to give a bit of background into what happened. So I was born and raised in the Northern Territory, and then I kind of left and taught around the world as a teacher. That's my background. I have quite an extensive career in education, actually, which is from primary school, middle school, high school, and university. I've taught in Australia, Indonesia, Spain, China. Like, I've really got a lot of different experiences that I can pull from. My family is also from the Northern Territory, and they are also teachers and entrepreneurs, which helps in that. And I'm kind of saying that because what we're about to go through is a lot of development, and it felt like that draw two circles, draw the whole owl. And I kind of wanted just to give a bit of context as to why sometimes these things acted and happened a bit faster and it would be on you and your own skill set to kind of do it in your own way if you were to replicate this. So 2020, COVID, existential crisis. Am I going to do a PhD? No, I'm going to make video games. Yay, taught myself Unity, got credentialed, and then headed back to my home of Darwin. So, chapter 1. This was the most amazing event because, you know, when you're starting out for the very first time and you put yourself out there and you don't know if anyone's in the ether who cares about what you're doing. I found a computer lab, I installed Unity on it, and then I did an Eventbrite and kind of to see if there's anyone who wants to do a video game design course. And this was literally the starting point for everything else that happened, where members of this particular class, literally like domino effects, connected me to everything else that can happen 3 years down the track. So it's such a pivotal moment to just put ourselves out there and ask the question, does anyone want to be a part of this? The three kind of key demographics that we identified from this, which just means like the type of people who were kind of coming to this and keen for it, was like people who were interested in youth development, making sure that there's something meaningful for youth to be doing and developing in. There was the enthusiast demographic, so people who were super keen to just be amongst gamers and kind of learn a little bit about game design, even though they may or may not make a career out of it. And then your teachers. So that was a really strong representation inside the group of teachers being like, we have no idea how to teach this 21st century skill set, and we're being told that we need to, so I'm coming here because I want to upskill. So really interesting, now we know who are the people in the community who are really looking for something like this. So now we can start to tailor the things and make it fit, which was basically what we started doing. There's so much to say about this particular photo, but I am going to just be really quite brief with it. This is when I approached the local council and said, I hear that you've got some disengaged youth who are looking at leaving high school and maybe are checking out a little bit in life. What if I taught them to make video games and we ran that program with them? And what if they presented those video games at your already set up geek event? You know, and they really loved the idea. It was an opportunity for just to try and see if the kids, they love playing games, maybe they love making games. And it was an incredibly impactful moment for the kids. So what we're looking at here is the Chief Minister, the Minister of Education and Minister of Industry, Tourism and Trade, all there looking and talking to these students who made video games for the first time, and talking about how that was something that they wanted to do, which started the entire conversation with the right people to know that there was a demand for this and that it was effective. So those students, instead of dropping out, I go onto it in a little bit in the next slide, they actually went on to enter into the industry. So, you know, one of the students went and joined an IT company where his parents were like, you need to leave school and be a mechanic. I'm kind of skipping a little bit here, but one of the students, so phase 2 of this, I'll just go over it first, was a success. How about I teach these kids to teach how to make video games. So then they can incorporate that into their skill set and they can make money from doing it. And that way we also then have other people who are in the community delivering this kind of education that is not me, which is also amazing. So that we're looking at ways of lighting little fires. And so they did. We ran a 10-week course. We got people from all over Darwin and Palmerston in. And the thing that I wanted to touch on, because this is such an important moment, is that that particular student who was leaving high school, not only did he not leave high school, he won ICT Student of the Year for his work and what he was doing. And he wrote a letter to the Department of Education and said, actually nothing that is available right now is anything I want to study and it doesn't interest me. I would like for you to pay for a Cert 3 in AIE game development, please, so that I can stay in Year 12. And they did. You know, and that is what it is about. You know, like that moment there where the child recognizes it's not them, but it's the environment, and that if they change the environment, then they can succeed. Like that is such an important, powerful moment for that individual's life, but also for the rest of us to see like what can happen. We also had a whole bunch of enthusiasts. You know, like people who were just really excited by video games and people who wanted to be amongst other people and learn this skill for the first time. You know, so what we did was we started organizing meetups. We did that in a way that Ernesto says he goes to the cafe and waits for people to come to him. Well, we made a Discord, NT Game Designers, and that was our digital cafe. And then we just kind of waited and people filled, and I was very nervous because we had like 5 people in there and I was talking as if we had 100, and I was trying like, is anyone out there? And slowly but surely the community built. Like now we have over 200 people in that Discord, and that it's a really active community for people helping each other out on the different bits. And then they kind of said, hey, we should have a face-to-face meetup. And for me, that's like amazing. Like, let's do it. So I went to Mad Snake Cafe, which is like an 80s style cafe, and asked them, please, 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 can we have a corner of your room so we can start to meet? And that kind of grew into the second photo there, where it was like a 3D artist in the Northern Territory delivering a bit of education on 3D art. And then Gareth, who wanted to develop an AR app, wanting to find people who he might be able to hire for that particular app. So we had industry coming in, we had our local people delivering education, and from that particular meetup is also really special in the second photo because we had really pivotal members of the community meet for the very first time that would then go on and do pretty amazing things, which I'm kind of about to get into. So, does anyone actually care? Yes. So we answered that question. We weren't just shouting in the wind. There were people who were willing and able to spend their time, money, and energy on getting behind a particular thing. Awesome. Now that we have that, can we actually do the thing? Or is this too hard for us still? You know, and that's something that's also really important to tackle. Energy and enthusiasm is great, but we also need to be able to produce and we need to be able to create meaningfully. So, game jams, man. Who would have thought? Game jams are just such an amazingly accessible way for people to sink their teeth into this industry. It's something that we have as a real advantage, I think, in this video game space. And what that meant, so the community asked for it. You know, they were saying, I think it's about time we should do a game jam. Great. So didn't make a game jam before, went on Itch and kind of learned how to do it, put it all together, got the local esports community to contribute. They said they had some leftover money from the government, and we said, great, we've got prizes now, we've got a game jam, let's make it a month long so it's not super stressful and crunchy. Let's like tell them we don't care what engine they use, we don't care what assets they use, you know, let's just get them excited about making video games. And that was when we found Rusted Warfare. So a member of the Northern Territory community had born and raised in the Northern Territory and is just a genius, and he's here in the room, but he's a little shy, so I'm not going to point him out. But you can go and talk to him later on. He has an amazing game that's on iOS, on Android, and on PC as well. And he made his own game engine for it, and it's super successful. And it was like, oh my God, man. Yes! And then he made this game, which is in the top left here, which was a boating. It was about Australia and trying to, what was special about the Northern Territory. He made a game about fishing where you did little tasks and you collected cans of beer. And there was just nothing more Australian, so he won that award, obviously, the most Australian game. So Game Jam was just a fantastic way of casting a net to see who was out there in the world and give people who'd never made a game before, we can tell them, go on Scratch, use whatever. We don't care. It'll be considered, and get them with their first wins. The second really big moment in this space was someone approached me and said, hey, listen, I'd really love to do a video game on the Think Desert Race. I have a couple of developers who are a little green. Would you be able to help us get it over the line and maybe find a bit of funding? So great. There's someone in the community who's passionate about it. For those who don't know, the Think Desert Race is a really pivotal race in the Northern Territory. It's one of the largest endurance races in the world. Toby Price, I guess, is the famous name in the documentary that everyone might have seen. And so for me, we had this amazing opportunity then. So you've got a Northern Territory iconic event that happens, someone who wants to kind of develop this video game, and all we needed to find was money. It's just not a surprise to us in the room. So we went to the Innovation Territory and we said, there's only a small pocket of funds that they're giving out, but could we, as a video game, get some money for your stuff? And they kind of said, it's not really innovation. And we said, but it's not innovation. And we compromised and ended up getting the initial funding, off the ground, which wasn't a lot of money. It had to be matched, and there was still a lot of effort to kind of get that together. But ultimately, it meant that we could get some money. We could spend 6 months of pretty intense development on the first game ever in the Northern Territory, and release something in the same time that the Think Desert Race launched in Alice Springs. So this was when the Northern Territory News, which is a very traditional newspaper, picked it up and did the work kind of for the community. I didn't have anything to do with that particular article. It just came out because this was happening in the Northern Territory now for the very first time. The other thing that happens in video games, so one of those members, Nathan and CJ from Salty Games, they got together and they said, they've got experience in the cattle industry and they really wanted to make a cattle simulator video game. Cool. That's weird as hell and I love it. Let's do it. And my own studio then was really getting off the ground in this moment as well, which is Larrikin Interactive, and we started developing Diets and Dieties, which is, so there were 2 moments in 2 video games then, with 2 studios forming, with more than 2 people, starting to grow a little bit and become a thing, because we were believing that we could, and there was momentum, and there were people who were interested in what we were doing. And then this moment happened when we applied for Screen Australia, and we got it! Yes! It's such a massive, because there was no funding in the Northern Territory, and there was no hope it didn't look like, of getting funding. And so Screen Australia coming in that way was super, super important, because it completely changed the conversation in the Northern Territory. Completely changed it. We had not just 1 studio, but 2, we were starting to have an industry, which is something that the bigger the wave, the faster that you're going to be able to surf it. And so it was really important to have that moment. And then the Screen Territory did get on board in a big way. On the left, now we have funding in the Northern Territory. We have a conceptual prototype and vertical slice funding. And that's only a few months old. It's barely released. And on the right there, they also funded for the first time travel to GDC for a video game event. They'd never funded anything like that before. And we had Sky and Declan, people who were in their early 20s who thought that they would never be able to make video games in the Northern Territory as part of Larrikin Interactive, fly to San Francisco within the first year of development of a video game and demo it at GDC. You can't learn at that speed anywhere else, and you can't be a part of the community any faster than that. And so that is what we are talking about in this particular instance, that opportunity. I've been told that we don't have much time left, so I'm going to hurry up. This is also something that I want to touch on. The GCC is a community that we founded. It took that committee who was advising the Geek Fest in Palmerston, and we we incorporated this not-for-profit association called Geek Culture Collective. And through the Geek Culture Collective, we started putting on mini events that culminated in this behemoth of an event. Like, I'm not going to say it's as big as PAX, but it's like pretty big. It's 15, we expected 500 people, we got 1,500 people through the door somehow. We didn't even expect that. No one bought tickets to the last bloody week, so we didn't know how many people were coming. The convention center that we ran it in had never done an event like this before, and we as a community had never run an event like this before, so we were like all just making it up as we were going. But it ended up being just such a beautiful event for the community, and this is the NT News' response. I love this newspaper article, because it does want to celebrate that there's kind of a geek community, but it doesn't want to remove the headline of bones being found on the beach. You can really almost internally see the editor being like, oh, I get it, but Darwin. So we're making progress. So tick. And then I guess to end the talk, we are doing Tropicon again this year. We've got funding for it again. It's happening next month. I hope someone's organising it. I don't know what the newspaper article is going to be, but I look forward to it. Hope no one finds any bones. This is a really important thing in the Northern Territory. So we spent 2 years negotiating with the government around what we think the Northern Territory might benefit from. And it was through the Innovation Department-ish. And this is a not-for-profit co-working space and school that we're setting up now in the centre of the CBD, in this beautiful, one of the oldest buildings in Darwin, built in 1890. And it's like really early days, and we're definitely at the stage where we don't know what we're doing, but we're having a good old crack because we think like a not-for-profit education delivery and co-working space seems to be what the Northern Territory needs, given what's happened in the last few years. So, but it is still very early days in that. And then I guess what I'm doing in this slide here is that last year we had 3 of us, and this year we have 13 of us here at GCAP. So if it feels like this, it's because we're coming to network with you. We're gonna find you. Yeah, so like a lot of the lovely people who are in the front row and scattered throughout here are all from the Northern Territory, having a crack at what is this beautiful industry that we're in. And so if you do see them and they say to you that they're from the Northern Territory, we still really appreciate all of the time, love and energy that you have to support us grow, because we are still in our very, very early days, and we have a much more robust industry now than we did 3 years ago. But tides of change are fickle, and we still have a long way to go before we are cemented securely. So that is all from me and my talk. Thank you very much for listening. Cool.